But first, a Wisconsin judge under arrest and facing charges accused of flouting federal law to help an illegal immigrant. Federal prosecutors say Milwaukee County Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan allegedly helped that migrant avoid arrest by ICE officers at the courthouse. It's a bizarre case and it's still unfolding. Hello, I'm John Roberts in Washington. Sandra, good to see you back again.
All right, good to be back with you as well, John. I'm Sandra Smith in New York, and this is America Reports. So today's arrest of a judge marks the second such case in the last 24 hours. A former New Mexico judge and his wife were taken into custody yesterday.
I didn't like Exxon's response. We have somebody that wanted. I'd probably be inclined to keep Exxon out. I didn't like their response. They're playing too cute.
We have a very long history in Venezuela. In fact, we first got into Venezuela back in 1940s. We've had our assets seized there twice.
It's quite a shift to see an attorney general facing potential court penalties, fines, or even detention for cover-ups and defiance. Usually, that's the kind of hassle low-level officials run into, not someone at the top of the law enforcement ladder. So, here we are, with Pam Bondi caught in a bind from several directions, and things are ramping up fast. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg pointed out that the Trump administration clearly disregarded his order in an immigration matter. There's enough probable cause for him to consider holding the government in criminal contempt, and he's demanding an explanation from Bondi's Justice Department.
And so you can imagine to re-enter a third time would require some pretty significant changes from what we've historically seen here and what is currently the state. If we look at the legal and commercial constructs and frameworks in place today in Venezuela, today it's uninvestable. First and foremost, obviously, is the interest that we have in Venezuela. And I think, the way I would position that, I think one of the reasons why we see many of the industry players here is we're in a depletion business for a product that is in great demand and will be in demand for many, many, many decades to come. And as a depletion business, the biggest challenge we have is finding resources. There's an opportunity in Venezuela with all the resources there is we don't have that challenge of finding, we have the challenge of developing those resources. So I think it's in the best interest of these companies and frankly society as a whole for the industry to be interested in understanding what the opportunity here represents.
There's been an official warning from a judge, which is a pretty serious situation for Pam Bondi. This isn't just a casual comment, it's a strong reminder that there could be real consequences for ignoring court orders, and that could mean sanctions, fines, or even arrest for the involved officials. While the judge hasn't gone as far as issuing a warrant for Bondi's arrest, the contempt ruling is clear. Things need to change or they could get really messy. It's not every day that you hear about a sitting attorney general facing this kind of pressure. Judges don't typically go after the top law enforcement officer for contempt, since we expect the attorney general to uphold the law. But here we are. Bondi is pushing back, and the judges are definitely paying attention and standing their ground. Lawmakers are also jumping into the fray, adding more pressure on her. Pam Bondi has found herself in quite a tight spot recently, especially with her refusal to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. She had made promises about transparency, claiming that the American people deserve to see those documents. But now that she's in the Attorney General role, it feels like she's changed her stance, and that's not sitting well with Congress. Representative Thomas Massie even took to national television to suggest that the quickest way to achieve justice for Epstein's victims might just be to act against Bondi for obstructing their efforts. Things have really taken an interesting turn for Pam Bondi. It's not every day you see Congress seriously considering using a power they haven't really tapped into since the 1930s, like inherent contempt. They're talking about potentially fining or even arresting officials who don't play ball. Representative Rowana is also getting in on this drastic idea, which is quite surprising. Seeing members of Congress actually weighing their options to detain Bondi and bring her in for a chat is a bold move, especially since they're skipping the usual route through the courts for criminal contempt. This isn't just idle talk. Congress is stepping up and demanding accountability, something pretty rare in today's political scene. So Bondi finds herself in a tough spot. caught between strong-armed judges and Congress, both gearing up to take significant actions. The thought of Pam Bondi being handcuffed suddenly feels far more realistic than it ever has. Her supporters, of course, are quick to call it political drama, arguing that Democrats and liberal judges are just trying to intimidate her for being a loyal Trump ally. There is some merit to that viewpoint. After all, Bondi has been using the Justice Department to go after Trump's critics, hiding documents that could damage him and pushing back against judges and Congress when it suits her. The ironic twist here is that the whole reason she's under this kind of scrutiny is that the Attorney General is supposed to uphold the law impartially, not simply serve as the president's personal lawyer. Rather than maintaining independence, Bondi is turning the Justice Department into a tool for Trump, and now both the judicial and legislative branches are applying the pressure. It's like a high-stakes standoff, with Bondi testing the very systems that exist to keep her accountable. Now we're left wondering what's next for Pam Bondi. Will a judge actually take the step of holding her in criminal contempt? Will Congress make a move to detain her? Or will she back down before it gets to that point? Right now, it feels like she's in a high-stakes game, banking on the idea that they won't follow through with their threats. Let's dive into what's going on with Pam Bondi, because this situation is heating up, and it's more than just political noise. It's quite serious, really. So, there's this threat of criminal contempt coming from Judge Boasberg. It stems from an immigration case where the Trump administration allegedly brushed off a court order, and Judge Boasberg was pretty straightforward about it. He pointed out how the administration just ignored his ruling, which is a big deal. That kind of behavior can land you in hot water. Criminal contempt means someone is deliberately ignoring a court order, and it can lead to fines, sanctions, or even jail time for those involved. Now, while Judge Boasberg directed his contempt finding at the government as a whole, Bondi, as the Attorney General, holds responsibility for what the Department of Justice does in federal court. If the DOJ has been flouting court orders, that's on her. Boasberg has called for an explanation from the DOJ, insisting they need to come to court and justify why they shouldn't be held in contempt. If they don't provide a convincing answer, things could escalate quickly. It's rare for judges to even think about holding an attorney general in contempt, since you typically see cooperation between the judiciary and the Justice Department, given they're part of the same justice system. But with Bondi, it's a different story. She appears to be allowing the DOJ to brush aside court orders that conflict with Trump's agenda. Now, there's also the looming concern of what could happen if the situation spirals out of control. Imagine if a judge lost patience and issued that contempt order. Arresting or detaining a sitting attorney general would throw us into uncharted territory and kick off a constitutional crisis unlike anything we've experienced. That kind of political turmoil would dramatically shift the balance between the executive branch and the rest of the government. The stakes are undeniably high, and Bondi's walking a tightrope. She seems to think that her position and support from Trump will protect her, but judges and Congress are sending a clear message. No one, not even the Attorney General, is above the law. If she keeps pushing back, she might just face the harsh reality that those threats could become very real. So here's the deal with Pam Bondi and the Epstein files. It's quite a story. Before she became Attorney General, she was all about transparency, promising that the American public deserved to see those files. She even insisted that anyone who helped Epstein should face the music. But now, in her role at the Department of Justice, it seems like she's just shutting down any chances of releasing them, which has raised some eyebrows. Judges are definitely taking notice of this situation, and they're not happy. Judge Boasberg has gone ahead and issued a contempt warning. which is pretty much saying that this kind of behavior can't keep going without some sort of repercussions. Now, whether this actually leads to Bondi being arrested or detained, that's a bit unlikely. Typically, when it comes to criminal contempt, the usual result is fines or sanctions against the organization rather than jail time for individual officials. But if a judge deems that Bondi willfully disobeyed a court order, then, in theory, they could consider arrest. It would be a big step and doesn't seem probable, but the fact that it's on the table shows how serious this whole situation has become. And then there's this interesting twist with Congress. They have this rarely used tool called inherent contempt, which allows them to enforce their own subpoenas without having to go through the courts. If someone doesn't play ball with Congress, they can bring in the sergeant at arms to actually arrest that person and hold them until they comply. It's more of a civil thing rather than a criminal one, but it still means real arrest and detention. The last time Congress effectively flexed this power was back in the 1930s, which tells you how politically risky and complex it can be, requiring a majority vote and a good amount of guts to actually see it through. Now, things are heating up as members of Congress are starting to talk about using this inherent contempt against Bondi. Representative Thomas Massie was pretty straightforward on TV, saying that going for inherent contempt is the fastest route to justice for Epstein's victims. He's serious, and he's not alone in this. Representative Rowana is also considering this option seriously. Essentially, they're making it clear that if Bondi won't willingly hand over the Epstein files, Congress is ready to step in and make it happen. It's undeniable that this whole situation surrounding Pam Bondi and the Epstein files is unfolding in quite an unexpected way. Pam Bondi is in quite the pickle. Congress is really pressing her about the Epstein files, which she's refusing to let go of. There's chatter that she might be protecting some big names, possibly individuals tied to Trump, and their frustration is palpable. They've even talked about using inherent contempt to get her to cooperate, which is a serious move. If it comes to that, things could get wild. Imagine the House or Senate voting to hold her in inherent contempt, leading to the sergeant at arms having to arrest her. They'd bring her in front of Congress where she might be held until she finally gives up those elusive files. It almost sounds like something from a historical drama, but Congress really has that power, and they're actually considering flexing it. Now, whether they would actually go through with it is a whole other story. It hasn't happened in modern times to a sitting attorney general, and doing so could trigger a constitutional crisis. You can picture Trump freaking out, shouting about Congress overstepping, and then we'd end up with more court battles. Still, the fact that Congress is even thinking about such drastic measures speaks volumes about their irritation with Bondi's refusal to budge. Let's dig into the Epstein files a bit, since that's a major point of contention. Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy financier convicted of horrifying sex crimes involving minors, and he had connections to many powerful individuals in politics, business, and entertainment. There are files that allegedly detail these connections and what those involved might have known about his actions. These files have been kept hidden for years, and the public is itching to get their hands on them. People are desperate to figure out who enabled Epstein, who looked the other way, or who might have even been part of the problem. Bondi originally promised transparency, but now she's shutting down access, raising suspicions that she's shielding some influential figures, potentially even Trump himself. It's a real mess, and honestly, there's way more than just the Epstein files at play here. Congress is adamant about getting to the heart of this. Pam Bondi has certainly found herself in a challenging position lately, and it looks like she's really pushing the boundaries of what it means to be an attorney general. It all started when she was going through the confirmation process for her Senate role. Democrats were digging into her past, raising concerns about whether she would use the Justice Department as a weapon against those who opposed Trump. Bondi's answers were pretty vague. She claimed she would follow the law, but didn't reassure anyone that she would operate independently. Now, as Attorney General, those fears about her potentially politicizing her office are becoming more than just words. Reports from NPR and PBS highlight that Democrats are worried she might be selectively pursuing prosecutions against Trump's critics, all while withholding documents that could spark political upheaval. There's a strong indication that she's targeting judges who haven't ruled in Trump's favor, even calling some of them deranged and hinting at prosecuting them. It's clear that she's using DOJ resources not just to enforce the law, but to go after people who speak against Trump, all while refusing to release information that could put the former president in a difficult position. Judges in Congress are certainly feeling the heat, and they are standing firm because an attorney general is expected to uphold the law impartially, which Bondi seems to be skirting. There's a lot of tension in the air, with threats of contempt being tossed around, reminding everyone that no one is above the law, not even her. Here's where it gets a bit ironic. Bondi has been making quite a few threats, calling some judges deranged and suggesting they should face prosecution for their rulings. She's pushed the DOJ to go after judges who stand in the way of Trump's policies or have released immigration detainees. It appears she's been trying to intimidate them into submission, but instead they're holding their ground. They're making it clear to her that she can't disregard their orders or use the DOJ as a tool against them, warning her that if she does, they'll hold her in contempt. Every threat she's made is starting to backfire, creating a situation that seems to intensify day by day, and it doesn't look like anyone is ready to back down. While Bondi might think she's got things under control, it's clear that things are beginning to unravel for her. The bottom line is, if a judge decides to hold her in criminal contempt, she'll have to face the music in court and defend her actions. Pam Bondi is definitely in a tough spot right now. If it turns out she's guilty, we could see her facing hefty fines or even some jail time, which would be quite a first for someone in her position. Just think about the pandemonium that would create. There's also the potential for a real constitutional mess. Trump would likely argue that judges shouldn't have the authority to hold his attorney general accountable, especially when she's just following his orders. This could lead to a serious clash between the executive branch and the judicial branch. Imagine Congress stepping in and trying to invoke inherent contempt. That would escalate quickly, with an officer potentially showing up at the Department of Justice to take her into custody and drag her before Congress. You can bet Trump would lose it, claiming that Congress was basically kidnapping his attorney general. He might even instruct law enforcement to intervene and protect her. Just picture the scene. Congress wanting to arrest Bondi while Trump is doing everything he can to shield her from that outcome. We've never really encountered anything like this before, so who knows how things would unfold. While both scenarios seem a bit out there, it's fascinating how the conversation has shifted to such extreme possibilities. Bondi's actions have pushed boundaries so far that now other authorities are resorting to considering drastic measures in response. So here we are with Bondi facing some serious threats. She's at a crossroads deciding whether to back down or keep pressing forward. If she chooses to continue pushing, those threats could very well turn into an uncomfortable reality, leading us into unknown territory. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The prospect of Pam Bondi potentially facing arrest from judges and Congress isn't just about her. It speaks volumes about the balance of power in government. It raises important questions about accountability and how a president might misuse the Justice Department for personal gain. Essentially, Bondi is using the DOJ to further Trump's political goals, openly defying court orders that conflict with that agenda, and she's been dodging Congress when they request documentation. Pam Bondi is really stepping out of line by threatening judges who rule against Trump. It's honestly hard to believe she thinks that's how an attorney general should act. You'd think the job would involve sticking to the law fairly, showing respect for the courts, and cooperating with Congress, but it seems like she's more like Trump's personal lawyer and enforcer these days. Now we're seeing some pushback from the institutions. Some judges are even hinting at criminal contempt, and Congress is talking about inherent contempt. It's clear they're signaling that Bondi's disregard for them could lead to some serious consequences, like the possibility of arrest or detention. Can you imagine a sitting attorney general facing real threats of arrest from multiple angles? Now that's something you don't see every day. So why does this matter so much? If Bondi can just wave off courts and Congress without facing any fallout, then the whole system of checks and balances really falls apart. The idea behind having three branches of government is that they keep each other in check. Courts should be able to strike down executive actions, Congress should have the power to investigate and issue subpoenas, and the executive branch should be obligated to comply. But if the executive can simply ignore both courts and Congress, then what's the point of those checks? Trump seems to be testing the waters to see how far he can push this, using Bondi to defy the system. He likely figures that the courts and Congress won't really go through with their threats, knowing that arresting a sitting attorney general would create a huge political storm, so he probably thinks they'll just back down after some threats and complaints. Maybe he has a point. Perhaps the courts and Congress lack the stamina for such a confrontation, but there's also a chance that sooner or later, a judge or one chamber of Congress will decide enough is enough. If that happens, we could find ourselves in a real constitutional crisis. Just picture this. A judge orders Bondi's arrest, or Congress decides to invoke inherent contempt. Trump would probably resist and declare, "You can't arrest my attorney general." He might even order the Department of Justice or other law enforcement agencies to protect her. Things are getting quite intense with the government, and it looks like we might be heading for some serious conflicts. When different branches of government start ignoring each other and resort to force, that's when you know the rule of law is in trouble. Recently, Judge Boasberg has thrown a spotlight on the Trump administration, indicating that they're not respecting his orders. He's even considered taking a step towards criminal contempt. It's pretty alarming when a judge suggests that the government is knowingly breaking the law and is demanding answers. If those responses aren't up to par, the consequences could be quite serious. Now, as for whether Judge Boasberg would actually go ahead and order Pam Bondi's arrest, probably not. It would be unprecedented to take such drastic action against a sitting attorney general, and I imagine he doesn't want to make things even messier than they already are. However, he's definitely sending a message to Bondi that her defiance isn't flying under the radar. Boasberg is making clear that if she keeps this up, he'll be ready to use his authority to address her contempt. That's significant because if Bondi continues to ignore court rulings, there's a real possibility that a judge might take some serious action, and that would change everything. Switching gears a bit, Congress is contemplating some bold steps regarding inherent contempt. This could mean Congress taking the drastic measure of actually arresting someone to bring them in. This isn't something they've done since the 1930s, so it's a big political move requiring a strong commitment. There are folks like Thomas Massie and Rwanda discussing it openly, suggesting that if Bondi doesn't release those Epstein files, maybe they ought to consider arresting her. The fact that this is even being talked about shows Congress is really considering some serious actions, but will they actually go through with it? That's a tough call. To use inherent contempt against a sitting attorney general, they'd need a majority vote, and the sergeant at arms would have to be on board to implement it, not to mention the massive political backlash they'd be up against. So, let me break this down for you. We've got Pam Bondi, who's been all about transparency when it comes to those Epstein files, claiming they should be out in the open. But now that she's in the position of Attorney General, she's backpedaling and refusing to release anything. This has definitely sparked some serious backlash. People are starting to think she might be covering up for some influential names, including Trump. Congress is on a quest to uncover who knew what about Epstein and who might have been involved, but Bondi is keeping tight-lipped. Because of this, they're threatening to hold her in inherent contempt, which means she could be dragged before them and held until she finally hands over those files. It's a real pickle for her. And it's not just about the Epstein files. There's a growing concern that Bondi is using the Department of Justice to go after those who criticize Trump. She's been taking shots at judges, threatening prosecutors, and wielding DOJ resources against her opponents. That's definitely not the job description for an attorney general, who should be delivering fair justice instead of acting as a political hit squad. Congress and the judiciary are starting to push back, giving her the message loud and clear that weaponizing the DOJ won't fly. Now she's got a few paths ahead of her. She could decide to ease off, comply with court orders and congressional subpoenas, release those Epstein documents, and stop targeting her critics with the DOJ. If she goes that route, it could mean the end of those contempt threats. But let's be honest, admitting defeat isn't exactly her style, especially when she's been playing that enforcer role for Trump. Pam Bondi is in a pretty risky situation right now. She's really testing the waters, thinking she can push back against the authority of the courts and Congress, and it seems she's counting on Trump's influence to keep her safe. The thing is, that's a gamble. Eventually, someone's going to call her bluff. A judge might decide to throw a contempt order her way, or Congress could actually decide to take tangible action against her. If that happens, she'll find out if Trump's protection really means anything. It's not like he can just ignore a judge's order to arrest her or brush aside Congress sending someone to bring her in. Sure, he could dig in and create a fuss, but the stakes would be incredibly high, and it might not end well for her. So she's definitely walking on thin ice, and she might soon learn just how serious the consequences can be when you challenge the power of institutions that can enforce the law.